Smell hit me before anything else. That specific combination of industrial cleaner and stale coffee that means a hospital at 4 a.m. when the day shift hasn't arrived yet and the night crew is running on fumes. I'd been walking these hallways for 11 years. I knew every squeaky tile, every flickering fluorescent that maintenance kept promising to fix, every corner where the Wi-Fi signal dropped to 1 bar. That morning, the hallway outside the server room felt different. Quieter, in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. The monitoring dashboard on my phone showed green across the board, but something was off, and I've been doing this long enough to trust that feeling. My name is Scott Harmon. I'm 53 years old, and for the past 11 years I've been the Director of Clinical Information Systems at Mercy Ridge Medical Center in Raleigh, North Carolina. What that title actually means is this: when the electronic health records go down at 2 in the morning, I'm the one who fixes them. When the pharmacy dispensing system throws an error and nurses can't pull medications for ICU patients, I'm the one they call. When HIPAA auditors show up and want to know why a particular data field wasn't encrypted, I'm the one who sits across the table from them and explains, in language they can understand, why everything is fine. 11 years. Before that, 7 years at a hospital system in Charlotte. Before that, a decade doing healthcare IT for a vendor that no longer exists. I'd been in this world since before most people knew what an EHR was. I've watched paper charts get replaced by clunky software that nobody liked. Watched that software get replaced by slightly less clunky software that everybody hated differently. Watched the whole industry reinvent itself 3 times and make the same mistakes each time with more confidence and better PowerPoint slides. The patients at Mercy Ridge don't know my name. That's fine. That's how it should be. When my systems work, nobody thinks about them. Nurses chart without interruption. Physicians pull imaging studies in seconds. The pharmacy knows exactly what every patient on every floor is supposed to receive and when. The whole building runs on infrastructure that's invisible when it's healthy and catastrophic when it isn't. I like it that way. I'm the kind of person who finds satisfaction in things that nobody notices because they're working perfectly. My boss, the chief operating officer, called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon in March. Not unusual on its own. We met regularly. But her assistant had sent the calendar invite with no subject line, which she never did. And when I arrived, there was a man I didn't recognize sitting in one of the chairs across from her desk. Young, late 20s, suit that cost more than my first car. Laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard like he was about to start taking notes on whatever I said. My boss didn't quite meet my eyes when I sat down. "Scott," she said, "we've been doing a strategic review of our technology infrastructure. The board has been asking questions about AI integration, about cost efficiency, about whether we're positioned for the next decade." I'd heard variations of this speech before. I waited. "I want you to meet my nephew," she said. "He just completed his master's in health informatics at Duke, and he's been working on something I think you're going to find very interesting." There it was, her nephew. I'll call him by his preferred professional introduction, which he offered with a handshake so firm it felt like a negotiating tactic, had built what he described as a fully integrated AI-driven clinical workflow optimization platform. He developed it for his graduate thesis. It was cloud native. He used machine learning to predict staffing needs, automate medication reconciliation, optimize OR scheduling, and interface with all major EHR systems through what he called seamless API integration. He pulled up a demo on his laptop. It was genuinely beautiful. Clean interface, satisfying animations, a dashboard that showed exactly the kind of at-a-glance data that hospital administrators dream about at night. I watched him click through the screens, and I felt the specific dread of someone who has seen beautiful demos go to war with reality and knows exactly who wins. "How has it been tested?" I asked. "Extensive simulation modeling," he said. "Synthetic patient data sets. Theoretical load projections based on published benchmarks for facilities our size. Simulation modeling." I looked at my boss. She was looking at the laptop screen. "Mercy Ridge isn't a simulation," I said. "We have 847 licensed beds. We have 6 operating rooms running simultaneously on peak days. We have a level 2 trauma center that gets called up when the level I across town is at capacity. We have interfaces with 17 external labs, 4 imaging centers, the State Health Information Exchange, Medicare and Medicaid billing systems, and the DEA's prescription monitoring program. On a normal Tuesday afternoon, our EHR processes about 40,000 individual transactions per hour." He nodded along. I could tell he thought I was describing something complicated but manageable. "I've modeled for enterprise-scale environments," he said. "The architecture is designed to scale." The architecture was a graduate thesis. I didn't say that out loud. I said, When are you proposing to go live? My boss finally looked at me. Q3, she said. July, it was March. The conversation went on for another 40 minutes. He walked me through the platform's features. I asked technical questions that he answered with varying degrees of competence. Some of his answers were good, genuinely good, better than I expected. Some of them revealed that he understood how his system was supposed to work in theory, but hadn't considered what happened when the real world pushed back. What's your downtime protocol during the EHR cutover? I asked. We'll do a rolling migration, he said. Keep the old system running in parallel during the transition window. For how long? He glanced at his laptop. The plan calls for a 72-hour parallel operation period. 72 hours. I want you to understand what that means in a working hospital. 72 hours is 3 days. In 3 days, a Level 2 trauma center receives trauma activations, runs emergent surgeries, admits critically ill patients, discharges others, conducts hundreds of medication administration events, bills insurance for everything, submits pharmacy records to the state, coordinates with external labs on time-sensitive culture results. 3 days in parallel operation, meaning both systems running simultaneously, requires every clinician to document in 2 places, requires IT staff to monitor 2 systems for discrepancies, and requires a reconciliation process at the end that someone actually has to perform correctly. His plan did not mention who would perform that reconciliation. My boss walked me to the elevator afterward. Just the 2 of us in the hallway. I could tell she wanted to say something and was trying to find the version of it that would land softly. He's talented, she said. He is, I agreed. He built an impressive system for a graduate program. I'm not disputing that. The board is very interested in the cost projections, if this works the way he's modeled it. If, I said. She looked at me. Scott, I want you to work with him. Give him access to what he needs. Help make this transition successful. I understood what she wasn't saying. I'd been at this long enough to read the subtext. The decision had already been made before I walked into that room. I was being informed, not consulted. I will do everything I can to support a successful transition, I told her. And I meant it. Not because I changed my mind about the risks, but because the alternative, 1,200 patients in a hospital running on a system that nobody fully understood yet, was not acceptable to me. If this was happening, it was going to happen with me in the room. The next 3 months were instructive in the way that car accidents are instructive. You learn things, but not the way you choose to learn them. Her nephew worked hard. I'll give him that. He was in the building most days, often early, sometimes staying late. He had genuine enthusiasm for what he was building, the kind that comes from believing you've invented something important. When I showed him something he hadn't accounted for, the specific way our OR scheduling system integrated with anesthesia billing, the custom interface we'd built for our wound care clinic that had never been formally documented, he took notes and said he'd incorporate it. The problem wasn't his work ethic. The problem was what he didn't know he didn't know. In clinical IT, there's a concept called the last mile problem. You can build a perfect system in theory, and it will work beautifully with the 60% of your environment that follows standard specifications. The other 40% are exceptions, workarounds developed over years because the standard didn't account for some local reality, patches applied because a vendor went out of business, custom scripts written because the off-the-shelf solution couldn't handle a specific state Medicaid requirement. Those exceptions aren't documented anywhere formal. They live in the heads of people who built them. I had been building exceptions at Mercy Ridge for 11 years. There's a CPOE override protocol we use for the bone marrow transplant unit that isn't in any vendor documentation. The BMT pharmacist and I built it in 2018 because the standard medication ordering workflow created a 4-hour delay in certain high-dose chemotherapy regimens, and in bone marrow transplant, 4 hours matters. It's not elegant. It's a workaround on top of a workaround, and it requires a specific configuration in the pharmacy system that would look completely arbitrary to anyone who didn't know why it was there. There's a lab interface with a reference laboratory in Durham that transmits results in a non-standard format because the lab built their system in 2009 and hasn't updated the interface specification since. We have a translation layer that converts their format into something our EHR can read. It runs as a scheduled task every 15 minutes. If you don't know it exists and you migrate to a new system, you don't bring it along. There are 14 things like that. I know because I counted them the week after my boss told me what was happening. I wrote them down in a personal document I kept on my own laptop, not the network. Not because I was planning anything, at that point I wasn't, but because I wanted to understand exactly what we were dealing with. My last official day was June 28th, a Friday, 3 days before the platform was scheduled to go live. The transition plan called for a weekend cutover, which is standard practice, lower patient census, more time to troubleshoot before Monday morning's full clinical activity. My boss's nephew was running the Go Live command center from the IT conference room. He had 2 consultants from the platform vendor flying in from Austin. He had a project timeline on the wall with color-coded milestones and a Gantt chart that looked like it had been produced by someone who had taken a class on Gantt charts and enjoyed it very much. I packed my office over the course of that Friday. Coffee mug. Photo of my wife and me from a trip to Shenandoah a few years back. The small whiteboard where I'd kept a running list of ongoing issues erased now. The plant on the windowsill that had somehow survived 11 years of my sporadic watering. My boss's nephew stopped by around 3 in the afternoon. He seemed energized, nervous in the way that looks like excitement. "You're confident about Monday?" I asked. "We're ready," he said. "I know you have concerns, but I think once you see it running in a live environment." "Monday is a full house," I said. "First Monday of the month, which means scheduled admissions from the weekend boarding list, plus whatever comes through the ED overnight. Your OR block schedule shows 6 rooms running by 7 a.m. We've stress-tested the scheduling module extensively." I nodded. "One more thing. The bone marrow transplant unit uses a custom override protocol in the CPOE system. The details are in my handoff documentation, page 47. Make sure your vendor consultants understand it before Monday, not after." He wrote something down. I could see from the way he wrote it, quickly, without looking up, that it had joined a long list of things he was planning to circle back to. I drove home on the Beltline with the windows down and the radio off, which is unusual for me. I'm a radio-on person. That evening, I told my wife what I'd been feeling for 3 months, and hadn't said out loud, "I think this is going to go badly, and I don't know if I can watch it from the outside." She asked me what I meant by badly. I mean that if the worst things I'm imagining happen, they won't just affect the bottom line. They'll affect patients. She's a nurse. Retired now, 15 years in pediatric oncology before her knees gave out. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You documented everything?" "Everything I could think of," I said. "Then you did your job," she said. "Now it's their problem to solve." I tried to believe that. Saturday was quiet. Sunday I mowed the lawn and tried not to check my personal email, where several former colleagues still had my address. Monday morning I was pouring coffee at 7:15 when my phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. It was a charge nurse from the medical surgical floor. She'd gotten my personal number from a nurse who'd gotten it from the unit clerk who'd worked with me on a system issue 2 years ago. The chain of contact would have been impressive if the reason for the call wasn't what it was. "Mr. Harmon," she said, and her voice had the specific flatness of someone who has been dealing with a crisis for long enough that panic has burned down to exhaustion. "The medication administration system isn't working. We can't pull scheduled morning medications for patients in rooms 401 through 436. The system is showing all of them as not admitted." "How many patients?" 31. I told her I wasn't with the hospital anymore, and gave her the number for the IT help desk and for the vendor's emergency support line, both of which I had memorized. She thanked me and hung up. My phone rang 4 more times in the next 90 minutes. I didn't answer the ones I didn't recognize, but I listened to the voicemails. The pharmacy was getting error messages when trying to verify automated dispenser cavalry stocks. The OR scheduling system had lost the block schedule for 2 of the 6 rooms and was showing them as available, meaning the cases hadn't been canceled, but the system didn't know they were supposed to happen. The lab interface from the Durham Reference Laboratory, the one running on the 15-minute translation task, was throwing null results because the scheduled task hadn't been migrated. That last one I knew would happen. I had documented it on page 12 of my handoff package and flagged it in the transition checklist. Whether anyone had read page 12, I couldn't say. At 10:17 on Monday morning, my boss called. Her voice was controlled in the way that I recognized from 11 years of working with her. Controlled, being different from calm. Controlled means you're managing the panic, not that it isn't there. "Scott, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I said I'd try. "How bad is this going to get?" I asked her to tell me what she knew so far. It took her about 4 minutes. By the time she finished, I was standing at my kitchen counter with a pen, writing on a paper grocery bag, because it was the nearest surface available. The laboratory interface issue was causing delayed results for time-sensitive cultures. The OR scheduling error had been caught by a circulating nurse who noticed the physical board didn't match the system and called the surgeon directly. The cases were running, but on downtime paper protocols, which meant manual documentation that would have to be reconciled later. The medication administration issue had been partially resolved by switching affected units to downtime procedures, but the pharmacy system and the downtime system weren't communicating, which created a double verification bottleneck that was slowing medication delivery across 3 floors. And the BMT unit? I asked. She paused. There was an issue this morning with a chemotherapy order, she said quietly. The workaround protocol wasn't in the new system. The order went through the standard workflow. There was a delay. How long? 6 hours. The patient is stable. But, that one word covered a lot of ground. I told her what I needed. Temporary consultant agreement, day rate, in writing before I stepped foot in the building. Access to the old system backups, which I was confident still existed on the archived servers that her nephew probably hadn't touched because they weren't part of his migration plan. Her assurance that I would report to her directly, not to the project team. She agreed to all of it without negotiating. That told me more about how serious it was than anything she'd said on the call. I drove back to Mercy Ridge on a Tuesday morning wearing the same jeans I'd mowed the lawn in because I hadn't planned on needing professional clothes this week. The parking garage attendant, guy named Earl who'd been working that booth since before I started, waved me through with a nod and said welcome back like I'd just been on vacation. The IT conference room looked like something between a command center and a rec site. Her nephew was at the head of the table looking like he hadn't slept. The two vendor consultants were on laptops at the far end. There was a whiteboard covered in handwriting that had been erased and rewritten at least 3 times judging by the ghost marks. He looked at me when I walked in, and I could see him working out how he felt about it. To his credit, he landed on something that wasn't defensive. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "Tell me everything that's happened since Saturday night," I said. "In order. Don't summarize. Give me the actual sequence." He talked for 20 minutes. I listened without interrupting. By the end, I had what I needed. Not a complete picture, but a map of where the failures were concentrating. The core problem was the translation layer. His migration had moved the data, but not the processes. Specifically, the scheduled tasks and custom scripts that handled exception cases. They were still sitting on the old server, running against a database that was no longer receiving live updates, producing outputs that went nowhere. The new system was operating as if those processes didn't exist, because to it, they didn't. I won't walk through every hour of what followed, because some of it is technically detailed in ways that are only interesting to people who've done this work. And some of it is just grinding, the part of IT crisis response that looks from the outside like sitting very still in front of a screen, and from the inside like performing surgery in the dark. What I can tell you is that I worked through Tuesday and into Wednesday morning, went home for 5 hours, came back Wednesday afternoon, and finished by Thursday night. There were 18 exception processes that hadn't migrated. I documented each one, fixed 14 of them directly, and wrote clear enough specifications for the remaining 4 that the vendor consultants could implement them without me standing over their shoulders. The laboratory interface was back online by Tuesday afternoon. The pharmacy system was fully reconciled by Wednesday morning. The BMT workaround protocol was rebuilt in the new system Wednesday evening. I sat with the BMT pharmacist for 3 hours while we rebuilt it from scratch, and she walked me through 2 additional edge cases she discovered in the interim that hadn't been in my original documentation either. Those went into the new system too. Thursday morning, I walked into my boss's office. She looked like she'd aged a week in 4 days, which was fair because she probably felt that way. "It's stable," I said. "Not done. There are 3 items on the punch list that need follow-up in the next 2 weeks, and I've written them up, but the critical systems are running clean." She leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "The board called twice this morning," she said. "I know," I said. "I have some things I want to say to you before we talk about next steps, and I'd like you to hear them without interrupting." She nodded. "I did not want this to happen," I said. "I know there are people who would say I saw this coming and let it fail on purpose to prove a point. That is not what I did. I gave your nephew every piece of information I had. I documented more thoroughly than I've documented anything in 11 years here. I flagged risks in writing, in meetings, and in person. The decision to proceed on this timeline was made above my level, and I accepted that because it wasn't my decision to make. But I am telling you now, clearly and for the record, the process that led to this outcome was flawed, and the flaw was in the decision-making, not in the technology." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know. I didn't expect that. I'd prepared for defensiveness. I should have listened more carefully," she said. "He's talented. He worked hard. But I let the family connection affect my judgment about the timeline. That's on me." I appreciated her saying it. It didn't fix anything that had already happened. But it was honest, and I'd learned to value honest in this building. My contract. I said the number I'd decided on before I walked in the door. She didn't blink. "Monthly retainer? For the next 6 months, while they stabilize. After that, we negotiate based on where things stand." "What about your official role?" I had thought about this. What I wanted wasn't my old title back. What I wanted was the structural change that would have prevented this. A clinical IT governance committee with real physician and nursing input. A formal process for any system change above a certain risk threshold. And IT reporting through the clinical side of the house, not through operations. She listened to all of it. She pushed back on the reporting structure. That was a board-level decision, she said, and I agreed to let it be a board-level discussion rather than a condition. Everything else she agreed to in principle, pending documentation. Her nephew was reassigned to a project management role in the revenue cycle department. I heard later that he was actually good at it. Revenue cycle is different work, more structured, less dependent on institutional knowledge, and his gift for systems thinking translated well. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. I felt relieved mostly. Relieved he was somewhere his skills fit, rather than somewhere his ambition outpaced them. 6 months later, the platform was running the way it was designed to run. It was genuinely good technology. I'll say that clearly, because it's true. What it needed was more time, a longer parallel operation period, and a migration process built around the reality of the environment it was entering, rather than a theoretical benchmark. Given all of that, it was better than what we'd had before. Faster, more intuitive for clinicians, better reporting. On the morning we hit 90 days without a critical system event, a milestone I'd set internally as my own benchmark, I drove to work with the radio on for the first time in a long time. Nothing significant, just the local NPR affiliate running the morning news. But it felt like something had unclenched. My wife asked me that evening how it felt to be back. I told her honestly, it feels like the thing I was good at started working again. That's enough. I poured myself a small glass of the rye whiskey my son-in-law had brought back from a distillery in Tennessee at Christmas, and I sat on the back porch while the evening got dark. And I thought about what it means to know something deeply enough that people need you to know it. Not because you made yourself indispensable on purpose, but because you paid attention for long enough that the knowledge just accumulated, the way rust does on a gate, the way rings accumulate inside a tree. That's not something any graduate program gives you. That's just time and care and showing up 11 years in a row even when nobody was watching. Some things can't be modeled in advance. Some things you only learn by doing them until they're part of you. And some lessons, the expensive ones, the ones that keep hospital administrators awake and make board members call twice before 9 a.m., only land when reality sits down across the table and refuses to be negotiated with. The platform is still running. I check on it every morning when I walk in. Still quiet. Still green across the board. That's the job.